Welcome to QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2022. QueerTWENTY is egomonk's annual flagship program where we celebrate exceptional queer Indians succeeding in fields such as science, commerce, medicine, arts, social justice, etc. Today we have Dr. Aqsa Shaikh with us, or Dr. Sahiba as she is fondly known on social media. Aqsa has more than 12 years of professional experience in practicing medicine and around 10 years of experience in university teaching. Aqsa is India's first and only trans officer serving as the nodal officer of COVID Vaccination Center. And she has become a prominent face for the intersection of healthcare and trans representation in India. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Aqsa. Aqsa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Aksa, your tweet on being the only transgender person to head a COVID vaccination center in India brought to front the severe lack of representation the trans community has in medical field. What, according to you, is the primary reason for this, and how can positive changes be incorporated?
When I tweeted about being the first transgender person to become the nodal officer of a COVID vaccination center, I was not really aware if the other trans persons were also holding this position. And therefore, it was a question. It was, are there more or am I alone? And I realized very soon that I was the only trans person to head a COVID vaccination center. And while I was elated to be able to hold that responsible position, it was also a harsh fact that there are hardly any trans persons who have been able to become doctors or healthcare providers, that there are very few trans people who are even able to get a full education or being able to reach college. And very sadly, there are very few trans persons who are even able to get school education or to have a safe environment in the school where they're not bullied or where they are able to, enjoy their childhood. So that tweet was basically a reflection on how in our society trans people have been deprived of the opportunity of basic education, forget about medical education, and then holding positions of responsibility, especially in the pandemic times.
So, Aksa, even science and medicine, in general, STEM as a field, they are also not devoid of stereotyping and stigmatization. Can you share your personal and professional journey in science, in medicine as a field? Like, what are the good parts and what are the bad parts that you have faced so far?
When it comes to my own journey in STEM, I always wanted to be a medical doctor, and I got admission into one of the best medical colleges in Mumbai. And I was very, very rosy-eyed, when I entered the halls of the medical colleges. But then the harsh reality hit me very soon. Medical spaces are very gendered spaces. They are very binary spaces. I remember students sitting in male rows and female rows. Of course, the washrooms were binary. Even in canteens, men and women would sit differently. In libraries, they would sit differently. And there was also, the additional burden of medical science that hampered the mental health of queer students. So what I realized very soon is that the medical science from which I was expecting that it will be kind in understanding queer folks was actually more harsh. In the subject of psychiatry, I realized that we were categorized as people having some kind of mental illness. Trans people were said to have gender identity disorder that needed to be treated. In the textbook of forensic medicine, I realized that we were called sexual perverts, and I came to understand about Section 377 and how it affects lives of queer persons. When I talked about physiology as a subject, I realized that people with intersex variations were also considered to be disordered. So the medical science actually looked at people from a very pathologizing lens, from a lens of criminalization and from a lens of disease. And when you are in that system, talking about yourself as a disease or a criminal, then there's a lot of internalized hate that you have for yourself. There's a lot of, am I a criminal? Am I someone who is having the disease? Is it all in my mind? And then there's a lot of self-doubt that people go into, which probably you may not face in other professions. And also the medical science is a very intimate subject, where the patients are there in their naked truth. As doctors, you need to have close interaction with patients, with other colleagues. I remember this very odd thing that used to happen whenever I had to enter the operation theater, and before that I needed to change into scrubs. And the men's changing area didn't have cubicles. It had one hall in which everyone changed in front of everyone, and it was considered very normal. But then for someone like me, as a trans woman who was not out at that point of time, to do that in front of other men was as bad as molestation. And therefore I had to wait for every one of them to change, give some odd explanation as to why I'm not changing in front of them, and then change. So there are many small things, which can hamper the sustenance of a trans or queer person in the medical college, even in the first place if they are able to gain an entry. So first, getting an entry is difficult, and once they gain an entry, it's a very long course of almost 6 years. And then to sustain yourself through that, to stay in a hostel, for example, we do not have gender neutral hostels in any medical college in India. So those are the kind of challenges that you get to face. But then I also realized that, especially when you go to higher education, like post-graduation studies, when people are more aged and wiser, when they've seen more of the world, more of things, and especially in the current times, there has been a lot of emphasis on creating gender neutral environments, on making the medical science queer and trans affirmative. So while what I faced was quite horrendous, I have hope for the future medical students and students who will be pursuing STEM, that we will make it better.
Day-to-day intricacies, the day-to-day challenges of being a trans person and being in this field, and clearly they must have been intense to deal with, like not only like physically but even mentally. What kept you going? Like, what made you stick around? What kept you going for finishing your studies and getting a degree and practicing?
So I wouldn't be romanticizing my struggle with the mental health in the context of my medical education, because it wasn't anything good. I was having depression right from the third year of my medical college. I also started having high blood pressure at that point of time and had to be put on treatment. And there was a point of time, where I had kind of decided to leave the medical course. So it had been quite difficult. But then, since I also come from a family background of poverty, and becoming a doctor was like, a solution to that situation. And therefore, it was more of an existential crisis that I had to succeed. There was no other option. I don't come from a privileged background that if I leave medical education, then probably I can do something else, or my parents wouldn't mind that. So it was more of a compulsion that I had to complete my medical education. And it happened. I was a meritorious student in my 10th and 12th. But the kind of challenges that I faced in the medical colleges, I think no one could prepare you for that. But when I look back at those times, I also try to reflect on what were the things that facilitated my continuation of medical education. And it would have been, I think, the support of my treating team. So when I was suffering from depression, my teachers from the psychiatry department were extremely kind, understanding. I underwent counseling for almost a month. They are the ones who helped me understand my own transness. They are the ones who, told me that you can always go slow. It's because medical education is a rat race, especially when you are in a very esteemed institute. So they helped me cope up with it. I had very few friends, but I had one or two friends, who held my hand during that difficult time. I didn't have family support because they didn't understand how can one get depressed. It's like it's all in your mind. So while it was a difficult situation and all, I think support from my physicians, support from a few of my friends which I had, helped me pass through it. And I hope that me and other trans persons who are now in a safer and privileged positions are able to support the young medical students, young trans medical students who are also facing similar challenges, so that they don't have to go through what we unfortunately had to go through during that course.
And I absolutely resonate with what you're saying. Like, even our loved ones, like, love does not mean understanding and acceptance of what you're going through. A lot of time we end up like gaslighting ourselves, like, is it happening, is it not happening, am I making this up, or are these my excuses? How I'm so sorry, I'm digressing from the set. How are you now?
So 2021 was bad, because taking up the responsibility of the nodal officer in the midst of the pandemic, where you want to first save yourself also, your family also, and then you have so much responsibility, was very difficult and challenging. I was again diagnosed with depression in the end of 2021 and have been on treatment since then for the last 1 year. Things have become much better now. So 22 was good, and 23 has also started on a good note. So I'm quite hopeful.
Aqsa, now you have been in this field for a long time. You have traveled a lot on your journey of becoming who you are, as you are right. What would be your advice to next generation of queer health workers who are about to join the force or who are in the process of joining? Based on your experiences, your learnings, what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, what would you say to them to stay true to themselves and carry
on? I really feel that the young queer and trans folks are quite smart, and I really envy and wish that I had that smartness, I had that insight at that age, because I came to terms with my transness at the age of 20 years. And when I speak with young 20-year-old queer and trans folks right now, I feel like, wow, they know so much already. So it's not an advice, but I would say a reflection on the kind of journey that I had. And, while in my case, for example, when I came out 2 decades back, it was a difficult time. It was a different time. It was a time when Section 377 was still there. It was a time when transness was still considered a pathology. Things have changed now. And I think, we need to first of all start loving ourselves before we ask for acceptance from other people. So I think that's a very important step that, young queer students in STEM should do. That first of all, build upon your self-esteem, start loving yourself, think of yourself as someone who is as normal as anyone else in this society. Second is very important, I think, while everyone has to select their time and of coming out of the closet and to whom they come out of the closet, because safety is very important. I think it's important to take calculated risks and come out to your family members, come out to your friends, come out to your teachers, because that helps you create a safety net. A small bunch of people who know about you, with whom you can be yourself, so that your dysphoria decreases. And many of the things that we are afraid of, that we anticipate that this bad thing will happen to us, most of them do not happen to us. So I think it's important to take those small steps of calculated risks, and come out as much as you can. It's not just going to help you, it's also very honestly a justice to the people who love you, that they should also know who you are in your true self. And I wouldn't want my loved one to fake their identity. And I think it's also doing justice to them, that if you are my child, if you're trans, if you're queer, whatever, I would have loved you to come out to me. And third and very important thing is, if you are in a position of privilege, if you are in a position where you have your safety on, I think you need to start speaking on it. Because the more we speak about it, the more visibilization is there, the more conversations happen, there's more normalization also which happens. Though this is an added responsibility on us, this is the kind of silent queer labor that we all do. But when you look at the larger benefit of how it can be even life-saving sometimes for some of the queer and trans folks who may be facing violence at the hands of their loved ones, at the hands of their family and partners, I think these conversations can be life-saving. And that is why they are very vital and important to do.
What do you believe is the role of institutions and government in supporting India's queer population? And how do we as activists, as queers, how do we hold them accountable?
I always believe this, that when you are talking about the rights of marginalized groups, vulnerable groups, oppressed populations, it's important to have a historical perspective. We cannot start from now and say, okay, now how to solve this problem. We'll have to go back maybe a few decades back, maybe a few centuries back, to see how the society, how the people who are governing us have treated us. How historically we have been marginalized, criminalized, pathologized, excluded and thrown to the margins of the society. Because that repatriation, that compensation is important when we speak about the rights of trans persons. So for example, when we speak about reservation for trans persons, people are like, oh, no one is discriminating against you today. You can go to school, you can go to college, you can get employment. Why do you need to beg? Why do you need to do social work? And then it's like anytime you speak about affirmative action, anytime you speak about something like reservation, you have the point of meritocracy coming into debate. And therefore, it's important to talk about how the historical marginalization was done, and how it's important to compensate for it. Because even though that active discrimination may not happen, though it does happen, but according to some people it doesn't happen now because they don't see it, there will be always stigmatization because of what was said in the past and how we have been treated in the past. So it's important that our families, our society and our government, I look at them at these three levels of from nearness to farther off, they all need to be held accountable. Families have not just oppressed trans persons, they've even killed trans persons. We have seen how society has excluded trans persons from all fields of equal opportunity. We've seen how governments have criminalized trans persons. And therefore, it's important that the demands of the trans persons for better acceptance in their families, in terms of legal rights like inheritance, right to stay in their natal homes, right to be cared when they are sick, for example, is paid heed to. It's important that when we speak about our society, while transphobia is now legally a crime, I mean, if you discriminate against a trans person, you can face imprisonment of 6 months to 2 years. But homophobia is still not a crime. There's still so much of resistance when we speak about same-sex marriages. There is so much of resistance when we speak about reservation in jobs and education not based on caste, but based on other forms of oppression. And even when we speak about the government, things have changed. The judiciary pitched in with the Nalsa judgment. They also pitched in with the decriminalization of 377. The government came up with the Transgender Persons Act. But then that is not enough. And it should not be, said like, oh, we have done this for you and that is enough now. Right? So it's important that we constantly, keep pitching, we constantly keep demanding for our rights till we become an equal citizen of this country, which has been our due for centuries but has been denied to us. So I always look at trans rights from a very legal perspective, and I have been very actively pushing through the RTIs and through complaints mechanisms for something very simple, like, for example, gender neutral washrooms. For something very simple like, access to healthcare to the trans persons, access to life-saving gender-affirming surgery, which currently is not available even in hospitals like AIIMS. So it's important that we keep demanding these small things, because these small things, make life worth living. They help you live your complete and fulfilling life. And it is something that we need to have. No one is doing a charity or favor on us, for example, by giving us reservation. This is our due. So I think it's important to look at it from a very rights-based approach when we are talking of queer and trans rights.
What makes your hope that this will get better going on? Like, what makes you hope that? I'm just personally asking because I struggle with a lot of times. I keep like, I'll give you a context. I go into the line of like, is this a wishful thinking? Is my brain playing a game where if I stay positive, I will not be depressed? Or is there actually a reasonable ground for us to hope that things will change?
So I come from a very traditional Orthodox Muslim family. My mother is illiterate, but she ensured that I become a doctor. And when I came out to my family, irrespective of their level of education, for example, my brother who's an engineer and my mother who is illiterate, both of them opposed. And there was a very fierce opposition, especially from my family, when I came out at the age of 20 to them and said that I want to have a sex change surgery. That's what it was called at that time. And naturally, that was not happening. And my mother used to threaten me that, if you do this, then I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to die of a heart attack because I can't bear to see my son becoming my daughter. To the point now where my mother is staying with me, is calling me her daughter. She is gifting me the accessories for women, like from salwar kameez to sari to earrings. I'm wearing her jewelry even right now. And it's amazing how that shift happened. It took a decade. And I had to be very patient with her. But then I did realize that the kind of background she came from, she had never heard of a single queer and trans person. For her, the only idea of trans persons were the Hijra community members who would come on weddings. And she didn't want to see her doctor's son becoming that. So I could understand her fears. I said, I hear you, but this is not the only representation. And I remember showing my mother the video of Ghazal Dhaliwal when she did a show on NDTV, and I'm like, this is how trans people can also look post-transition. They can hold very dignified jobs, the jobs that this society calls dignified. I've seen how my mother, when she saw me happier post-transition, I didn't used to talk to her, when she was not allowing me to transition. I would be very sad. And now when she sees me all smiling, happy, having a great bunch of supportive friends, being more famous in the society than I was, in my previous role. And then, she understands that, yeah, this is what you were talking of, that this is the state of happiness that you wished for. It was not just about undergoing some kind of surgery or taking hormones or anything. It is this feeling that you were talking of, and now she can understand that. Similarly, I also, realized this, that I've been working a lot with the Muslim community to ensure that the transphobia ends. I've been writing a lot on those issues, speaking with religious leaders on that, and I've seen that change happen. And that I realized that this change can happen when we can show cross solidarity. I remember that during the Shaheen Bagh movement, a lot of queer and trans persons from across the religious affiliations, or those who are even atheists, went and sat with those women. They had conversations, they shared their struggles, and then they realized, that ultimately we are all suffering at the hands of this patriarchal society. We are suffering at the hands of this fascist government. And when, for example, I speak about Muslim rights, then they're also ready to hear about trans rights. So I think showing that cross solidarity has helped, and I've seen tremendous amount of change happening in my Muslim community, in my immediate circle. I teach in a Muslim minority institute, where I was on the verge of losing my job when I decided to transition to now where they have given me the responsibility of the nodal officer. And I'm currently heading the department. So you can understand that, a lot of change happens. I think you need to be persistent. You need to, keep pushing for it. And this is what gives me hope. And I think seriously that things will get better. Another something which I would like to share is something from my intimate experiences. When I transitioned, I thought I'll never find love, especially from cis het men. I thought I'll never find a partner. I thought I'll never be able to get married. But in the last few years, I transitioned in the year 2019. I have been in multiple relationships, one after another, and I've received love, I've received acceptance, and possibly I may soon get married also. So all these small things, they build up on hope, and I think things are going to get better.
Who is your queer role model?
I would say Ghazal Dhaliwal, because she was the first queer person I saw.
What's the best thing about being a queer? What is the best thing about being a queer?
I think not fitting into the box is very beautiful.
Who is your favorite queer character on screen, if you have any?
I would say it would be from the short film Monsoon Date, which was played by Konkona Singh Sharma.
Yeah. How does the queer youth of today differ from the queer youth of before?
I think they are more confident. I think they are more knowledgeable thanks to Instagram, and they are more accepting. That's beautiful.
What is the one thing that scares you the most?
I think not being able to find a life partner currently. That's the scare.
What is one thing that inspires you the most?
Seeing the happiness in the eyes of the people that I've been able to help, whether they are young queer persons or through our other work that we do, I think their smiles.
So I'm going to say a couple of words, and I would like your immediate reaction.
Okay.
Yeah. It could be non-verbal also. A lot of our speakers just made faces.
Yeah.
So that works too. Okay. Workplace equity.
Dream.
Homophobia. Allyship. Ambition.
Not really.
Politics.
Misunderstood, but a devil that can't be avoided.
India.
Lot of potential.
Dr. Aqsa, thank you so much for this interesting conversation today. We are so pleased for you to be this part of this year's cohort.